Hello and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Today we're going to take a look at the topic of digital colonization. What does it mean? What are the impacts? What does it inference? Are there any legislations in place? Where does India stand? All that I'm going to be discussing with a panel of experts. In fact, I have to confess, before coming, I did Google what digital colonization means, and I'm going to give you the dictionary meaning, but let the others explain it much better than I do. Digital colonization is the use of digital technology for political, economic, and social domination of another nation or territory. That's what, well, it says in the dictionary, but let's hear what the others say. Joining me on the show is Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya. He's a digital policy expert, and he's the one who actually coined the phrase digital colonization. Dilip Cherian, he's an image guru, political analyst, and also someone who's been coming on a lot of shows on artificial intelligence and all sorts of technology, and someone who I go to for explanatory journalism. And Dr. Didar Singh, he's a former Secretary of the Government of India and also a former Secretary General at FICCI. Jayajit, since you came up with this term earlier, can you just explain to us what exactly does one understand with digital colonization?
Yeah, in fact, Priya, let me just tell you that the definition you got is nearly close to what I had first created. And obviously, it has been worked on. And let me give a little background before I come down to what is digital colonization, because it is much less understood. Beyond the term, it is misused in terms of talking about data localization as part of digital colonization. Data localization is also a part of digital colonization, and it's more of a mechanism to be able to hit back and break the glass ceiling of digital colonization. But let me just go back to history. We all know India was one of the richest countries in the world, if not the richest country in the world. Now, we did not become rich by selling vegetables to Europe and to China and to others. We became rich by selling technology. And what was the technology we were selling? We were selling high-end textiles. We were selling steel, which was high carbon tensile steel, which is called wood steel. And based on that steel was defense equipment such as the Damascus sword and so on were created. It was almost like Intel Inside.
It's commodity, not technology. Am I getting it wrong?
Yeah, no, these are all technology-based commodities. These are equipment that are based on technology. What I mean is that we did not just pick up primary industry products like mining and agriculture and just ship them out. We were not a primary industry-based economy. We were a secondary industry-based economy. And what secondary industry essentially means is that we used to take the raw materials, process them using technology, and then sell them as value-added goods, right? And that is what technology is. And the difference between technology and science is that technology actually takes science and converts it into something of economic value, whereas science stays as science and nothing else. So India was obviously at the forefront of both science and of technology. And I'm just going to focus on technology because that's the center point of digital colonization. So as I was talking about wood steel, the whole concept of high carbon steel was not known anywhere else in the world. So you could not really make defense equipment which will not break. Because a steel sword was a defense equipment. Similarly, 80% of the textiles imported by Netherlands used to come from one place, from Bengal. 80% of imports. Much of Europe was draining in terms of its resources because it had to import all the technologically advanced goods from India. And let me take just one example of the shipping industry. India was at the forefront of shipping industry to the extent that it was decimating the British shipping industry. So in about 1810 or so, the British shipping industry, the shipwrights, went to the king and said, look, you're freely allowing the Indian ships to move around. And we will obviously lose our jobs. We'll not have an industry left and we'll starve to death. But when you look around for your Royal Navy to be supported, you'll not find us there because you'll be dead by then. So you need to support our industry if you want us to help the Royal Navy. And that was their argument. So 1815, and it's all recorded. You can, the British
Parliament. Just trying to see where you're going with this. You're trying to, connect to the current day situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, because that was the British moment of Atmanirbhar. They realized that they're bleeding money. They do not have the sovereign capability of supporting their own defense systems. that they're dependent on India as a nation, and therefore they had to take some regulatory measures to break the back of Indian technology. And therefore they passed a actual parliamentary law in 1815 saying that all ships above below 300 tons of capacity will not be cannot be Indian ships. They have to be British ships, and any ship which is Indian, even if it has a British flag, will have to pay extra duty on everything that's bringing it to Europe.
Okay.
Which then broke the back of the Indian ships.
Okay, I got it. I just want to bring Dilip in also quickly. It's I think what he's if you can connect the dots to the now, Dilip, what he's trying to say is the way we were coerced and hemmed in by laws which were outside, which led to the breakdown of. I think in short, Jajit, isn't this what you're trying to come up to?
Yeah, in fact, what I was trying to say is that
quickly, short, me because I want to get Dilip in. Huh?
They passed a subsequent law. The key that I'm driving at, and then I'm sorry I'm taking away time from Dilip, is that essentially when you break the industry, you do not have money to fund for the next generation of technology. In the next 50 years, British shipbuilding became one of the most superior ships in the world, and Indian shipbuilding was finished. So I'll just stop there and over to Dilip.
Okay. So Dilip, the digital colonization, what do you understand by that?
I think that it's a term fraught with interesting interpretations. But I also believe that the world has evolved a very, very long way from the conventional digitalization, colonizations, and therefore we need to look at it carefully. But I think in practical terms, if one goes away from the theory and the research, and even the polemics, we need to figure out what it means in practical terms for my citizen. For my citizen of India, I think as all of us are citizens of India, we need to understand what the implications of colonization are. Does it mean that I'm not able to transact my business? Does it mean that I have limited access to information which is freely accessible in some part of the world? Does it mean that I have a nanny who looks after my need, but also ensures that I don't go outside the borders of my digital ecospace? These are the fundamental questions we need to look at. In addition, we need to look at one other question, and which we often tend to not understand. Am I a colony if my citizens have access to data services, for example, at a ridiculously cheap rate and something that is comparable across the world? And because if you look at a purchasing power parity, is data available to the most deprived person at the bottom of the pyramid at a price where she can afford to be on the net and access the world as she wants to? If I give her that power, then I'm not being digitally colonized. If I give her open access at a cheap price on a device which is low priced, affordable on a PPP basis, then I'm not in danger of being digitally colonized. That is how I would look at the issue. So
accessibility on your own terms.
Accessibility, freely, cheaply. These are the three things. You cannot be colonized if you have this. In fact, in Jayajit's proposition, Indian shipmaking didn't have access to those markets, didn't have access to global markets, and therefore it was a form of colonization. Agreed, endorsed. What I'm talking about digital is, the power is in my hand. I should be able to go without barriers. And I really think that, we'll come later on to the issue of data warehousing and all of that, but let's keep that for the moment. And I'll let Dildar now get onto it so that you can go around again.
Okay. Dr. Dildar, thank you for waiting patiently. But if I would like your first impressions on what the other panelists have said and your views on how you see digital colonization.
I want to go beyond colonization.
Okay.
I want to talk about AI, and I want to talk about the digital colonization that you've mentioned here. Now, what is AI, for example? We have to understand that AI is nothing but using the internet or using the digital world to get ahead. It's artificial intelligence. So it's intelligence. Let's not forget the word intelligence. Let us not forget the word artificial. Now, why am I mentioning all this? I'm mentioning all this, Dr. Bhattacharya, basically to say that this question of the digital divide has always been there. It's nothing new. It's always been there. Whenever there is going to be a certain structure in government, certain structure in the economy, people will take steps to perpetuate that structure. That's what has been happening since the First World War. We have a structure which is sovereign in nature around the world, and that structure is now exacerbated by various means, and digital technology is just one more means to do it. Now, if you look at artificial intelligence, what is the first time that we as humans begin to see it? It was e-commerce actually. You began to see it directly to yourself all the time, impacting you in some way or the other. Now, we talked about digital divide then also, and we still talk about it. But e-commerce gave a lot of benefits to a lot of people. And it's also countries, please understand this. This is very, very important. I did my research on e-commerce, by the way. That was my PhD.
Okay.
You began to have e-commerce being looked at in every single country. Every country began to get onto it and understand it and try and do the same thing they're doing then as they're doing with artificial intelligence today. Even India in 2001 set up an AI India for a concept in Niti Aayog. Now this was done not just in India, it was done in every country. Every country wanted to be on the AI bandwagon because they didn't want to lose out on this whole question of being up to speed so far as being, in today's modern world in a particular way. Now, this is going to be digital colonized. Yes, certainly we are going to be. You're right, Dr. Bhattacharya. We are going to be colonized and we will continue to be colonized. But we as a nation, and this is not something where Priya should really be looking at, but we as a nation are already number 5. In the whole digital world, we are number 5 in terms of the amount of data that we have, the kind of stuff that we do. So we are already there. Number 5 is not somewhere to be scoffed at in 200 nations we're talking about. We're already number 5. So we're doing a lot of work in AI. We're doing a lot of work that is keeping us right up in the front of it. There are 100 startups today which are working on AI. Okay. Every single company in India, any big company is working on AI in some form or the other. They're beginning to use it in their day-to-day functioning. And that is something which is very, very good and will keep us always ahead of the curve. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Jaydeep, I know we may have drifted a bit, but the basics, there is a whole lot of digital colonization, which Dilip explained pretty, he kind of connected the dots.
So that's why, Priya, it's a little longish conversation. And I was explaining what we mean by digital colonization.
I'm sorry to rush you, but this is television, so we just need to quickly,
No, sure, no, understand. It's just that we get misled by the word digital colonization. It's a term I coined in 2005 to wake people up. Now, what is the challenge and why the word digital colonization? And that's why I went ahead and first redefined what is colonization. And what I mentioned is that it's extraction of economic benefit from an area of influence through manipulation of the rules of engagement or through either force or deceit. And we went through 3 phases of colonization in that sense. The first was social colonization, where, the upper caste or upper class or the lords would actually lord over the rest of the society because, they would get disproportionate economic benefit based on what their position is.
Now you're saying big tech is the upper caste. So I'm just trying to... the big lords who are lording over us, right?
Then we went over through the classical political economic colonization, right? Which we are aware of, which is what we refer to as colonization. And then we had what I'm calling as the digital colonization or technological colonization. And what do I mean by that? I think there's a very important word that Didar Singh used, which is perpetuate. So you will see that after 1960s, with a lot of force, there was professors being sent to India to teach us about what is IPR and patents and copyrights, including to my alma mater at IIT Kanpur, because it was incubated by the Americans. And suddenly after 1960, patents and IPR became very, very critical. Whereas the 2 key industrial revolution technologies, which is the steam engine and the bessemerization, were all open source, right? And they grew when they became open source. And so why was there such a force on moving into trade regime, into IPR, into copyrights? That was to perpetuate the disproportionate economic benefit that the Western nations were getting from their former colonies. If the colonies went away,
I think Dilip also wants to come in.
No. Please go on.
if
Sorry,
the colonies went away, then how do you continue to have the standard of living and what they call as quote unquote productivity? Because in my view, productivity is nothing more than being able to extract more and have the same standard of living. Now, let me take two quick examples. One was AI that again, Didar Singh was talking about. If you look at AI, it has got direct relationship to where the data is coming from, because the raw material for AI data, we ended up losing our data to foreign companies. And that problem is when the OpenAI founder comes and tells in India that India can never make a generative AI because we have the data. Along with it, we also have scarcity of capital. If you look at what the West is doing to China in terms of semiconductors, they are doing technology denial regime. We have continuously been having that. If we do not own the ecosystem, then we'll never have control over technology. So if there's a bright student of engineering who has come out with a better prefetch queue, what will he do with that? Because he doesn't have the microprocessor. He'll go to an Intel or a Qualcomm and say, hey, I've got a better prefetch queue. Why don't you take it and give me some money? They'll say, no, I'll give you 10 more patents from my side, and you can give your patent for free. But what will I do with those 10, 11 patents? I don't have the ecosystem to be able to monetize out of it. So if you look at each of these technologies, the core of it is still being controlled. In fact, there's one Dutch company which controls how you do manufacturing of semiconductors, one company. And there is tight regime, including in US, on how technology companies from US are either bought and so on and so forth. It's called the CFIUS regulation. Under the CFIUS regulation, any company which is having a specific technology just cannot be bought by any other, by a company from any other company. So when the Chinese try to go and buy these companies, they are simply denied the ability to buy these companies. You cannot buy those technologies. What the West did, including what the British did to India, was simply steal the technologies, including the ability to extract zinc from zinc oxide, which was a technology that uniquely India had for over 1,000 years, till the British stole it from the Zorawar mines, and then gave it back to Hindustan Zinc Limited to mine from the same mines. That's a parody of the entire situation. So digital colonization is not about digital per se or about data per se, which is what I said. It gets confused with data. It is about ability to receive technology freely. We do not have access to technology freely. Even if you put money on the table, you will not get the technology. And that is why you see the cost of production of an Apple phone is about $200, as you get from public information. And they're sold at what price? $1,000 to $1,200? That is the technology denial regime that we have, right? And let me take one more example, since we talked about iPhone. iPhone went ahead and sued Samsung because they were infringing on their copyright. And what was the copyright? Anything that is flat and has got round corners is a patent of Apple. Now, how can that be a patent? Anything which is flat and has got round corners. There are other patents filed where the switch off button on the keyboard, they put the switch off button of the PC on the keyboard and said that's a brilliant innovation and there's a patent on it. Anybody else who comes later has to pay me a fine. And by the way, I have patents myself. I've got patents in US, in India. I've worked for IBM research labs and so on and so forth. And that's where the penny dropping moment happened, that there is something significantly wrong going on. I can give you examples of DVDs, LEDs, and so on and so forth, where the technology denial regime came in. And that's what we called as digital colonization.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. I'm going to take a quick break and then I'm going to come back to Dilip and get his take on what you just said, but just a short break. Hello and welcome back to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. This week we're discussing digital colonization, what it means, what the impact and the dangers are. Dilip, you just heard what Jayajit said. He said, why is India in this technology denial, the state that we're in?
We are going to be in a sad situation of much greater technology denial. And there are two good reasons for it. One is, you may all have read in today morning's paper, there is this frightening bit of news that at Jayajit's alma mater, IIT, and the Indian Institute of Science have not received any funding for research since April this year, and they're all waiting. Two things have happened. Government has imposed on them a wonderful new method, which I'm sure is world-class and future-oriented, which is that they have to transfer funds only if they open a zero balance account. This is some accounting gobbledygook which somebody has come up with. Now, all of these institutions, including the revered BHU, professors are complaining loudly, wailing that their research projects are grinding to a halt. So this is one reason why we are going to get clobbered, whether we like it or not. The second thing why we will get colonized is because I was hearing Jayajit talk about Hindustan Zinc. Now, Vedanta has applied for a semiconductor production license. It got waylaid by, again, another wonderful regulation that the person who you get the technology from, in this case, a European company, must invest along with you. That company said, hey, we are technology suppliers. We are not investors. We are not investing in your company. So Vedanta goes to Foxconn, gets an investment sharing agreement. But the whole process has taken 18 months from the time the program was announced. Again, we are ripe for colonization. What happens instead? A purely US company, Micron, is given permission and massive subsidies to come in with their technology, which they're not going to share. No, thank you. Keep your hands off us. And we are going to be yet again colonized for yet again an obvious reason. You shut off the money pipe for research projects. You shut off the flexibility for Indian corporations to work the way they want to. You are ripe for digital and all other kinds of colonization. Thank you very much. There's no point sitting on your data. There's no point saying, I want to create this walled garden. The world does not recognize walled gardens unless you speak in Chinese. So the fact is that this is a new world we are living in, and we have to recognize that. And that is my worry. I worry about it because my citizen needs that freedom and needs the technology at an affordable price.
Very well put, Dilip. In fact, and this Vedanta case is in Gujarat. That's where they get. In terms of focus priority, that's a state that is really, does get a lot of breaks. Yeah, Jayajit, quickly, because we get Dr. Didare.
Just amplifying what Dilip said, and thanks, Dilip, for amplifying what I was saying. Is that if you recollect, magically the Semiconductor Limited, SCL Limited, in Chandigarh just burned down. One fine day, just burned down.
When I was in my pure journalism days in Business India, I had done a cover story on Semiconductors Complex Limited and why we were at the edge of being cutting edge.
Absolutely. And it just out of one fine day, out of the blue, it just burns down. And there was never any attempt made to again rebuild it. It was burnt to ashes, and that's about it. And we all know how it happened. So that's part of technology denial regime. And then we are still struggling after decades on trying to get the semiconductor industry back on track.
And this project was in the news for the last, ever since the Gujarat elections, we were told about this project. So any lacuna could have been, addressed and dealt with or, handled then.
No, of course not.
The tom-tomming it for 18 months or as long as it took. But I like the phrase, Dilip, wall garden unless you speak Chinese. Brilliant. Dr. Didare Singh.
Again, I want to go a little bit beyond the India story because it's focusing too much on it. I think your viewers want to first understand what AI is and what digital technology is all about. Now, you must understand that AI is the future. We have to
That
understand
we got from your earlier conversation, but just a bit about how we are, we are well placed. India, as you said, is ahead of the curve. We are fifth in 200 nations, whatever. But the thing is, how are we shooting ourselves in the foot? You've dealt with the, legislation. You also in your government role also. So how do you see the legislation concerning digital technology? How is
See,
India placed?
the whole story behind digital technology is going to be data. Can we protect our data? That's
Yeah.
the very, very important thing. In that context, India has introduced a data plan very,
Section.
very recently. As you're aware, it's coming up in the monsoon season session of Parliament is going to come up. It's called
Data Protection Act.
Personal Data Protection Act bill, which is being introduced in 2023. So we are well aware of it. We know that data is the key, and this is what is going to matter whether you're a Chinese garden or an Indian garden. It's the data in it that is going to really actually matter. Now, in that sense, government of India has taken a very, very proactive view on this whole AI thing. We are, unlike a lot of other countries, we don't talk in terms of controlling AI, but we talk in terms of controlling its impact. We want to see that the impact on people, on consumers, should be limited, should be controlled, and if there's any adverse impact, then it should be addressed. But we don't want to meddle with AI itself. We don't want to say that, no, we want to control that also, like China does. So we have taken a fairly proactive view on this, and I think that this will work. And this is the reason that in India, and I don't know if you've seen the Deloitte report of 2022. It shows that India Inc. is beginning to use AI a lot. And that is why I talked about that number 5 or whatever we are already on in the global scenario.
Yeah.
Now, that's important to understand that this is an issue not just for India. Please understand that. It's not an Indian issue. It's an issue which is around the world. Today, the US companies are number one there. Facebook, Microsoft, what have you. They are number one because they control data and they control technology. But slowly the game is shifting. And the game is shifting to China and it is shifting to India. And in that, we should be very happy that we are going to be there.
Okay. Final word to Dilip. We are totally out of time, but Dilip, I'll leave you to have the final word because you have a better grip on this conversation than I do.
Honestly, I'm delighted to hear what Dr. Dildar Singh has said. AI is definitely at the cutting edge, and Indian corporates are getting into it. I think that we have taken a great and well entitled blow to our collective egos with what the founder of the AI company said. We should choose wisely to ignore such taunts and get on to doing what we have to do. I personally believe that the future belongs to more open societies, and that closed societies will pay a price of inferior positions of feeling and gloating that they have protected their citizens. It is in protection because these minds will wander freely, and India has, after all, one of the largest populations living in other countries. They come back with those ideas to India, and we don't want Indians to feel deprived. That is my only anxiety when it comes to this so-called protection acts. I am all for protection of individual privacy, but as a collective, we should be actually free and generous with what we have, in the hope that we can equally exploit databases outside for the collective good of Indians.
Thank you on that, because you have noticed the data protection, suddenly we get these other narratives of nationalism and the rest of it, as is what is happening, unfortunately, with all things these days. But at the end of the day, I know, Jajit, you want to come, but we're totally out of time. So if you have a one-line answer, yes, otherwise no.
And one line, I think, is that digital colonization is not about protection. I think we're in a different direction. Digital colonization is about recognizing what the trade regimes are and then reacting to it appropriately.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Well, thank you all for this conversation, and I hope to get you back for more such topics and another time. But thank you so much for this. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.